Hi, this is Richard Barrett for Guitarist magazine, welcoming you to another Blues Headlines. This time I've gone for something in the vein of Paul Kossoff, the guitarist with Free. So let's have a listen and I'll be back afterwards to talk you through. Hopefully you'll have been able to hear that I was shooting for something frozen in time around the time of Fire and Water, the classic Free album, and I've deliberately included a few elements that I've taken from his solos on some of those tracks. So let's get started with phrase 1. As Paul was playing with a three-piece, he'd quite often use open strings and unusual voicings to fill out the sound, and you'll hear that on the track All Right Now, of course, as well as various other things like Mr. Big. And I've started with an idea a little bit like that. So I've gone... We've got to mention the vibrato before we go any further, actually. I've done my best. It's quite a difficult thing to do, and I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go, about how, a physical kind of strategies that you can use. But I'm using the G string to play the melody note and using the open B string as drogue. The timing isn't of paramount importance. In fact, if it's a little bit relaxed, that's great. We ended up getting a take that I liked. I could have maybe... And there's something about the dissonance between the two notes, and that creates quite a big, thick sound that fills the gap between the bass and the drums. So I've had a bit of a play with that, and then I've gone into a pentatonic lick. I've gone for wide and fast, and what I am finding, as I may have mentioned in a previous headlines, is if I pre-bend to the note, then I seem to be able to get a bit more of an effective vibrato. I don't know why that is. My theory is that perhaps because I'm not thinking about the bend, I've already done that bit, so I can concentrate on the wobble rather than doing both at once. Like that, which tends to be a little bit too kind of coarse. This is quite fine. So I've gone both below and above. There is a bit of handling noise. We're going to get that outside the track. So if you get that, don't think you're doing it wrong. Right, that's pretty much it. So time to move on to the second example. Here I've gone for a little bit more of a conventional blues phrase, and I'm relying on the double track guitars in the background. Now I should mention that that's something that Paul would do quite a lot of the time. Not everything was recorded strictly as a three-piece, and if you listen to the track Fire and Water, you've got all sorts. You've got the rhythm guitar, two lead guitars, and various sort of overdubs. So they would use the studio for effects. Either way, I've just gone with a more bluesy... and I've tried to play this as a lead-on phrase. I recorded the examples separately, but with the knowledge that we would stick them together afterwards. So this feels like where he might have gone. And I've gone for a rhythmic bend, pre-bend and vibrato. You can see that's real opera singer vibrato there. And then this double stop. Again, bit of handling noise. That's all part of the sound, really. So that really is all that there is in that lick. This is about developing the touch, not using too much gain or anything like that, but we'll come back to that. It's time to move on to example 3. So we're continuing as the solo goes on, we're going higher, essentially building up to a bit of a crescendo here. This is where the natural end point to a solo might be, though there is another phrase to come afterwards. I've gone for this Not everything is automatically played with vibrato, and if you've ever watched my stuff before, you'll know that I'm being a bit of a broken record about that. Not everything should automatically have vibrato by default, but that's essentially what the phrase is. It's just happening on the first two strings. And that last note, yeah, there's not loads of sustain on it. Let it die naturally. And it just felt like the kind of thing he might have done just to do that leading back into the rhythm. Little touches like that lend a lot of attitude. Right, so before we go any further, I should talk about the vibrato. I've really got to grip it here. This is a standard set of 10s, well, 10 to 52 actually, but so the top. A lot of the strength is coming from the wrist. I've got 3 fingers grabbing that string. And it is a bit like the same muscles that I might use to turn a doorknob. It's not the fingers doing it, it's the wrist doing it. So I can only do it for so long before I start to run out of steam. But again, string noise. Try not to let your whole body tense up as I just did. But it's not easy. You know, it's not an easy thing to do. So don't kick yourself if you don't find it easy either. Right, let's have a look at the 4th and final phrase. In the tune Mr. Big, Paul does quite a long solo and he really pulls out all the stops. So we all know about the vibrato and the bluesy phrasing, but he'd do these triple note. In fact, I think he was these kind of ideas where it would really fill out the sound and it would really give things a lift, which is funny because a lot of people might assume that you just start playing really quickly. And of course, that's a great way of building a crescendo, but this is a much more effective way, really. A little bit of a wobble, and then I've taken exactly the same shape. So I've just filled that up by letting all the strings ring together, and you get that kind of resonance between them, kind of intermodulation. And the same thing is true of this last double stop. This is I think this is a real Kossoff lick. And you get them ringing together and the vibrato we've already spoken about. So that's the last phrase. I said I'd talk about tone earlier. Well, I'm plugged straight into the amp. And the amp is Marshall JTM 45 Mark II reissue. And I've linked the inputs. The high treble volume is set more or less 3/4 of the way up. I've absolutely maxed out the mids, treble about halfway, cut the presence a little bit, and hardly any bass on it because there's never any shortage of bass. And I'm guessing that's one of the reasons pedals like the Tube Screamer and Super Overdrive are so popular for pushing them, because they chop a lot of that out. But I found that by reducing the bass, I can get what I feel is quite an authentic sound. It's not super dirty. I can't play all of that riff for copyright reasons. But you get the idea. So there's a bit of crunch. You have to work it. It's not super distorted. I can get it more distorted than that, but we backed off a little bit because it started to sound a bit too modern, a bit too fizzy. We want loads of mids. And funnily enough, we found that the longer the amp was on, the warmer it got in physical terms as well as tonal terms. So that's how we got the tone on here. Well, there we have it. Obviously, have another listen through to my talk throughs of the examples if anything isn't clear, but we'll have the solo again now, and I hope you enjoy it. See you next time.